What do you think about Ethan's incredible journey? Do you believe in miracles, heaven, or divine messages? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's special story, one that might change the way you see life forever. Turn on notifications and join us on this journey of faith, hope, and extraordinary experiences. See you in the next video. Jesus spoke to me. 8-year-old reveals what he saw beyond life. It was a crisp Sunday evening in Dallas, Texas. And 8-year-old Ethan Carter sat in the back seat of his family's Ford SUV, his head resting against the window. They had just finished their weekly church service, and the warmth of the sermon still lingered in the air. His father, Daniel, hummed softly to him, his hands steady on the wheel. Beside him, Rebecca, his mother, was chatting excitedly about dinner plans, her voice full of love and laughter. Ethan, lost in his own world, flipped through his drawing pad, sketching a small angel with golden wings. The night felt peaceful, almost perfect. Then, screeching tires. A blaring siren. The deafening sound of metal crushing metal. Time seemed to slow as the impact sent the SUV spinning. Ethan felt his body jolt violently, his drawing pad flying from his hands. His mother's scream pierced through the chaos, followed by his father's urgent shout, but Ethan couldn't make out the words. And then, everything went black. The wreckage was unrecognizable. The once sturdy vehicle was now a twisted heap of metal, its frame barely holding together. The cold December air was thick with the smell of gasoline and burning rubber. First responders rushed to the scene, their flashing lights reflecting off the crumpled remains of the car. Paramedics quickly attended to Rebecca, who drifted in and out of consciousness, the metallic taste of blood filling her mouth. She barely registered the chaos around her. Her husband, Daniel, sat unmoving in the driver's seat, his hands frozen on the wheel. No one noticed Ethan. Not at first. It wasn't until a firefighter spotted a small sneaker peeking out from beneath the wreckage that they realized the boy was still inside. Was he alive? With extreme caution, they pulled Ethan from the crushed vehicle. His small frame was limp, lifeless, unresponsive. A paramedic immediately checked for a pulse. It was faint. "We need to get him out, now," one of them shouted. A helicopter was called in to airlift Ethan to Children's Medical Center Dallas. On the way, his heart stopped 3 times. Each time, the paramedics fought desperately to revive him. Each time, he came back. At the hospital, the doctors delivered the devastating news. Ethan might not survive. And even if he did, the damage to his brain could be irreversible. Sitting in the waiting room, Rebecca's world shattered. In a matter of minutes, she had lost her husband, and now, she might lose her son. The steady beeping of machines in the distance felt like a countdown to the worst day of her life. Tears streaming down her face, she whispered a broken prayer. "Please, God, don't take him too." The sterile hospital room was eerily quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of machines. Rebecca Carter sat motionless beside Ethan's hospital bed, her hands trembling as she held onto his small, lifeless fingers. His chest rose and fell with the assistance of a ventilator, the only sign that life still lingered within him. It had been 2 agonizing weeks since the accident. 2 weeks since she had lost Daniel, her husband. 2 weeks of living in limbo, caught between grief and desperate hope, waiting for a sign that Ethan would wake up. Doctors had warned her to prepare for the worst. Even if Ethan survived, he might never be the same. The damage to his brain could leave him unable to walk, speak, or even recognize her. But Rebecca refused to accept it. She couldn't lose him too. Every night, she prayed. Every night, she questioned. Why, God? Why did you take Daniel? Why did you let this happen? Why didn't you send angels to protect us? Her faith, once unshakable, was now a fragile thread unraveling with every passing hour. Outside, the winter wind howled against the hospital window, rattling the glass. Rebecca shivered, pulling her coat tighter around her shoulders. The weight of exhaustion, grief, and uncertainty pressed down on her, suffocating. Then, on the 14th night, something changed. Rebecca had dozed off in the chair beside Ethan's bed, her head resting against the thin hospital pillow. A sudden movement jolted her awake. She blinked. The room was dimly lit, the glow of the monitors casting soft shadows on the walls. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. Then, Ethan's fingers twitched. Her breath caught in her throat. Had she really seen that? Heart pounding, she leaned forward, gently squeezing his hand. Ethan, she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. Nothing. She was about to call for a nurse when, suddenly, his eyelids fluttered. Rebecca gasped. Oh my God. Ethan? Slowly, his deep brown eyes opened, unfocused at first but gradually adjusting to the dim light. His small chest rose and fell with a shaky breath. Then, in a voice hoarse from disuse, he spoke. Mom. I saw Dad. Rebecca's heart stopped. She stared at her son, eyes wide, unable to speak. A wave of chills ran through her body. What did you say? She stammered. Ethan blinked slowly, a peaceful expression settling over his face. I saw Dad, in heaven. Tears filled Rebecca's eyes. Was she dreaming? Was she losing her mind? But Ethan wasn't confused. He wasn't scared. Instead, he smiled. And in that moment, Rebecca knew, this was no ordinary awakening. Rebecca sat frozen, her pulse hammering in her ears. Did she hear him correctly? You saw Dad? She whispered, gripping Ethan's small hand tighter. Ethan nodded, his tired eyes still adjusting to the dim hospital room. Despite the beeping monitors and the weight of 2 weeks in a coma, his expression was calm, almost serene. He was happy, Mom, Ethan continued, his voice raspy but sure. He told me to tell you that he loves you, and that he's okay. Rebecca's breath hitched. This wasn't possible. She had never spoken to Ethan about heaven in such detail. How could he wake up and say something like this? Her fingers trembled as she brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. "Baby, what do you mean? Where did you see him?" Ethan took a slow breath, as if trying to remember. "It wasn't like here," he finally said. "Everything was light. Warm, but not hot. It felt safe." His lips curled into a small smile. "And I wasn't scared." Rebecca's throat tightened. Safe. That was the last thing she would have imagined after what he had been through. But Ethan wasn't finished. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Mom, I wasn't alone. There were 2 kids with me." A shiver ran down Rebecca's spine. "Kids?" Ethan nodded again. "A boy and a girl. They looked like you." His voice softened. "They said they're my brother and sister." Rebecca's vision blurred as tears welled in her eyes. Her grip on Ethan's hand tightened. How could he know? He had no siblings. At least, not on Earth. Before Ethan was born, Rebecca had suffered 2 miscarriages. 2 tiny lives she had mourned in silence, their memories tucked away in the deepest corners of her heart. She had never told Ethan. Never told anyone. And yet, he knew. Her breath came in short gasps. "Ethan, how do you know that?" He smiled gently, his small fingers squeezing hers. "I just knew, Mom. In heaven, you don't have to ask. You just know." A sob broke from Rebecca's lips. This wasn't a dream. It wasn't some strange hallucination. Her son had seen something real. Ethan looked up at her, eyes filled with something beyond his years. "They told me to tell you they love you," he said softly. "And that they've been watching over us." Rebecca let out a shaky breath, her tears finally falling. In that moment, grief, disbelief, and wonder swirled inside her all at once. Her son had been to the place she had spent her whole life wondering about. And he had come back with a message she would never forget. Rebecca sat beside Ethan's hospital bed, her mind racing. How could he know about the siblings he never met? How could he describe heaven with such certainty? Ethan had always been a bright, imaginative child, but this was different. His words weren't just stories, they carried weight, a depth far beyond his 8 years. She took a shaky breath. "Ethan, tell me more." He blinked, as if transported back to that place beyond this world. "I saw angels, Mom. They were everywhere." His voice, though still weak, held a quiet reverence. "They didn't talk like we do, but I could feel what they were saying. It was like they sang, but not with words. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just a child's imagination. The conviction in his voice sent shivers through her. Ethan's small fingers toyed with the edge of his blanket as he continued. "Everything felt so light there. Like love was everywhere. I wasn't scared." And then, he hesitated, his expression growing serious. "I saw him." Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. Him. Jesus. The way Ethan said his name, so sure, so certain, made her heart pound. He was waiting for me, Mom. He knew me. Like, really knew me. He looked at me, and I felt safe. More than safe. Loved. Tears blurred Rebecca's vision. How could this be real? She swallowed hard. Did he say anything to you? Ethan nodded, his gaze distant, as if reliving the moment. He told me I had to go back. Rebecca's hands clenched into fists. Go back? He said it wasn't my time yet, Ethan continued, looking up at her. He said I have a job to do. Rebecca's heart pounded. A job? Ethan nodded, eyes filled with a quiet resolve. He told me that people forget about him. That they get too busy, or they stop believing. He said I need to help remind them. Rebecca covered her mouth, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. Her son, her little boy who had just escaped death, had been given a mission. Ethan reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Mom, I have to tell people. They need to know he's real. Rebecca, still shaken, felt something stir deep within her. A renewed faith, a purpose she never expected. Her son had been sent back for a reason. And she would stand by him every step of the way. The day Ethan Carter was discharged from the hospital felt like a second chance at life. Doctors called it a miracle. Nurses whispered about it in the hallways. But for Rebecca, it was more than that, it was a calling. As they pulled into their driveway, the familiar sight of home felt strangely different. Nothing had changed, yet everything had. Rebecca helped Ethan out of the car, still recovering but stronger every day. Her son had come back from the brink of death, not just to survive, but with a mission. And that mission was just beginning. The following Sunday at New Life Church, the congregation welcomed Ethan with open arms. Many had prayed for his recovery, and now, they looked at him in awe. His story had already begun to spread. After the service, Pastor Mark approached Rebecca, his eyes filled with both curiosity and faith. Rebecca, would you and Ethan be willing to share your story next week? I believe people need to hear this. Rebecca hesitated, glancing at her son. Could they really do this? Ethan, standing beside her, tugged at her hand gently. His eyes were steady, unwavering. Mom, we have to. Rebecca took a deep breath, then nodded. Yes. We'll do it. The next Sunday, they stood before the entire church. Rebecca's hands trembled as she took the microphone, her voice breaking as she recounted the accident, the loss of Daniel, the terrifying nights in the hospital, the moment she thought she had lost everything. There were times I felt abandoned by God, she admitted, her voice raw with emotion. But now I see. He was with us every step of the way. Then, Ethan stepped forward. The room fell silent. Holding the microphone tightly in his small hands, he took a deep breath and spoke. Jesus is real, he said simply, his voice carrying across the sanctuary. I saw him. I saw my dad. And I saw my brother and sister, the ones I never met. Gasps echoed through the room. People wept. Others sat in stunned silence. Heaven is real, Ethan continued, his voice clear and strong. God loves us. Even when things are hard, even when terrible things happen, He's still there. The message spread quickly. Churches in other towns invited them to speak. News outlets picked up the story. Strangers reached out, sharing their own struggles, their own doubts. One grieving mother clutched Rebecca's hands after a service, tears streaming down her face. I lost my son last year. I was so angry at God. But hearing Ethan's story, I think I can believe again. Ethan's journey wasn't just about his own miracle. It was about giving others hope. One night, as they sat together under the Texas sky, Ethan looked up at his mother and whispered, "Mom, do you think I'm doing what Jesus asked me to do?" Rebecca smiled, her heart full for the first time in a long time. "Yes, sweetheart. I think you are." And so, their journey continued. Not just as a mother and son healing from tragedy, but as messengers of faith, hope, and the undeniable truth that heaven is real. What do you think about Ethan's incredible journey? Do you believe in miracles, divine encounters, or messages from heaven? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you or someone you know ever experienced something extraordinary, something that made you believe there's more beyond this life? Share your story in the comments below. Also, let us know where you're watching from. Your words might inspire someone else searching for hope today. And if Ethan's story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next powerful story. See you in the comments.